can you imagine a plane so frightening that even the Nazis feared its arrival? Though equipped with arguably outdated technology, this bomber carried out the first rash night raids into the heart of Germany and proved quite something in the line of swiftness, maneuverability, and range. What exactly was fascinating about this aircraft that led it to be considered by many as the crown jewel of Allied perseverance and bravery? Let's find out. In the maelstrom that was technology during World War II, state-of-the-art aircraft in 1939 were almost archaic by 1942, with the aviation industry continuing to turn out ever more fearsome and sophisticated warbirds. These early trailblazers, the uniquely styled Handley Page Hampton, breaking ground in those unpredictable and hazardous early days of conflict, had a daunting task ahead, all too often relying on what would be very shortly becoming outmoded technology in the relentless pace of war. Yet this Hampton stood for resilience and adaptability, despite forcing well outside the original specification reach into the combat environment. It flew the first daring night bombing sorties deep into Germany, one-way journeys, as they often were in those days, into history. Its light armor and meager bomb load notwithstanding, daring pilots exploited the best features of this early bomber: its speed, maneuverability, and long range. They went farther than any other Allied aircraft over the time, carrying the war into the heart of Germany in night raids so bold they were among the most hazardous and spectacular of World War II. In the 1930s, nobody could predict the setbacks that would rattle British pilots in the following decade. In 1932, the Air Ministry issued specification B.9/32, which detailed a twin-engine day bomber undefeated by all its predecessors. Handley Page was adventurous in their design. It soon received the blessings of the Air Ministry, principally since it established the perfect balance amongst range, payload, and speed. While British authorities had been anticipating a breakthrough aircraft to send the RAF to the pinnacle of combat aviation, they were caught off guard when the result would be verging towards box-marked obsolescence by its first flight. Completed early in 1936, the first prototype, HP.52, was an impressive sight. More streamlined than most of its contemporaries, it gave every indication of being exceptional, faster and more agile than anything else flown before. C.G. Gray of the Aeroplane magazine called it a flying suitcase due to its slender fuselage. This nickname worried the managers. Encouraged by the successful test flights of K-4240 in August 1936, the Air Ministry sanctioned an initial production batch with an order for 180 examples to specification B.30/36. The same day, another 100 aircraft powered by the Napier Dagger engine were requested from Belfast's Short and Harland. In early 1937, the second prototype, L7271, was completed with a somewhat more streamlined ventral defensive gun stance with a revised nose. The next prototype, L4032, appeared with the Pegasus 18 engines and was fitted with a redesigned nose with an optically flat bomb aiming panel and revised or renovated ventral and dorsal gun positions. On June 24, 1938, Lady Catherine Mary Montague Douglas Scott christened the L4032 with a toast to the spirit of John Hampton to arise and inspire its crews. By the end of 1938, the final production designs for the Hampton were settled. In addition to Handley Page's production line, English Electric of Preston, Lancashire, would produce the aircraft with a specifically dedicated Canadian plant supplementing the work. With the new bomber entering service, squadrons of RAF worldwide pilots hailed it as a reliable and efficient aircraft, a quantum leap over previous British bomber designs. The wing structure in particular impressed the bomber at those times and gave it new capabilities in British aviation. Instead of one piece, the wings were made of three main parts: the centre section, left and right outer wing. Every section had subsections, all indicating fastidious design. The main strength of the wing structure took its essential support from a sturdy main girder spar, supported by front and rear edge sections. These were more related to the aerodynamics. The wings also featured hydraulically controlled flaps. Both these flaps and the ailerons were strengthened with heavy D-spars. The wing designs was not meant for beauty to the eyes, but became an aerodynamic triumph. Tapered wings had been designed to reduce drag and endow this Hampton with a top speed of 265 miles per hour. There is also a safe landing at only 73 miles per hour. However, this speed and safety promotional scheme did not translate to comfort. It was cramped. There was little room for movements, which made long missions hard because of the Hampton's narrow body. Some of these were flying suitcase. British airman Wilfred John Mike Lewis said, It was a beautiful plane to fly, terrible to fly in. Cramped, no heat, no facilities, you got in there and you were stuck. Soon after, the Flying Suitcase was chosen to fly the longest and most dangerous mission of the war, a bombing raid on the heart of Germany. At the outbreak of war in 1939, Hamptons were first used for armed reconnaissance, which meant shadowing the German Navy by day. This proved disastrous. While it was speedy and agile, there was no way that a Hampton could stand up to the vastly faster fighters of the new Luftwaffe. Bomber Command accepted in December 1939 that using a Hampton in daylight operations would be impossible. Given that the Hampton had been designed as a daylight bomber, this was especially hard to accept. Barely a year in service, and it was all but obsolete. The loss of effective bombers was keenly felt when France fell. Britain was exposed, with Germans only across the English Channel. Yet, there was no means for the Allies to attack Germany itself. Thus, the Luftwaffe mounted an unrelenting campaign of bombing against Britain, which brought war on British soil for the first time and saw morale slide. The pressure was on the RAF to prove itself by hitting deep into Germany. At almost 600 miles away, Berlin was out of reach for most airplanes in that generation. Raids launched on Berlin meant flying deep into heavily defended enemy airspace. In the early phase, raids had to be in daylight to avoid civilian casualties, a move that made the bombers easy prey for the Luftwaffe. Everything changed following the Luftwaffe's bombing of Rotterdam on May 14, 1940. The British now turned to daring raids into German territory during the night, while the Flying Suitcase had to reinvent itself as a night bomber, with a range and speed to reach deep into Germany if it could avoid the Luftwaffe. The Hampton was to show Britain could strike at the very heart of the enemy. On March 19, 1940, the Hampton launched the first night attack on German soil, targeting the seaplane hangars in Hornum, Sylt. The British pilots were eager to hit back, but the risks were enormous. They had to fly through dense skies of anti-aircraft fire, or flak, deadly shrapnel that could shred the bombers into bits in an instant. To this were added the dangers of Luftwaffe fighters. The night missions were even harder because of the bad weather, poor visibility, and basic navigation systems. One would have to endure extreme stress, cramped conditions in the Flying Suitcase, and the sight of falling friends. Despite all these odds, determination seems to have shown in the face of danger among British pilots. By August 1940, Hampton raids over Germany were almost routine, and the casualty count moved increasingly. On the night of August 12, 1940, a force of 11 Hamptons was sent to destroy the ancient aqueduct over the River Ems, north of Munster. The mission was led by Flight Lieutenant Roderick Leroyd in Hampton P4403 EAM, with its crew, pilot officer John Lewis, Sergeant Walter Ellis, and leading aircraftman William Rich. The attack that night was heavy with menace in the sky. Heavily concentrated flak fire that turned to the sky into a killing field of obstacle course did not spare even 2 Hamptons, shooting both down and 2 others so badly damaged that they barely reached their target. For Leroyd and his crew, such adversity was custom made. He flew through searchlights and enemy fire. Bombs dropped from as low as 150 feet. This low altitude brought this plane dangerously close to the blasts. During the bombing run, enemy fire hit the Hampton, disabling its hydraulic system and damaging the wing flaps and undercarriage. Despite this very severe damage, the fuel tanks remained intact. Despite this heavy damage, Leroyd carried out his mission, ensuring all bombs were deployed. The damaged Hampton struggled back to England after the bombing run. Getting near their base, Leroyd realized it was too dangerous to attempt a landing at night. He flew around the base until the first light to land safely and avoid further injuries to his crew or more damage to the plane. He was subsequently awarded the Victoria Cross on September 9, 1940 for gallantry and outstanding leadership. He was then relieved from active duty and promoted. Handley Page Hampton performed many heroic acts in the early days of the war, like Leroyd. Although trailing behind newer bombers, the Hampton was vital in presenting an early Royal Navy during the formative conflict. It proved the tenacity of the Allies, striking deeper into German territory. Now that you've learnt about this outstanding feat of the Handley Page Hampton, let your thoughts flow out. Do you feel this plane should have been heralded a bit more? Let me know in the comments below, and hit subscribe for more interesting World War II stories.